Okay, so we've put our sleeve into our right hand armhole. Now we're going to bind our left hand armhole. And this machine here is the Coverstitch Binding Machine. So it's basically the same cover stitch machine as you saw on the hammer, except it has this binding attachment on the front of the machine. And we already have some pre-cut and pre-rolled binding, which is a one-way stretch fabric. Actually, it is a two-way stretch fabric. It's not very stretchy. It's like a t-shirt type fabric. And as I said, we've got this binding attachment on the front here. These are our tension plates. The back plate is where you thread the bind through, and you thread it through so that the wrong side of the fabric is facing out. And then this other plate here is for if we're doing swimwear and we might want to bind the edge of the swimwear pants. We can also put elastic inside the binding as well. So that tension plate is for the rubber elastic. We won't be using that for our neckline, of course. So we've threaded our binding through this plate here, in under the section there. And that just puts a little bit of pressure on it, just to bring it in and make it a bit nicer finish. And then it goes in between these two prongs here, in behind this plate here, and through the binding disc there. I don't know what to call that guide plate. So if you grab a pair of tweezers out of the drawer, you can push the binding through the little slot there and bring it out under here. Now it's probably hard to see that, but there's a little bit of metal at the top there, and the binding needs to actually fold back under that. And then you just pull it straight back. Make sure that the needles are out of the work, of course, so there's a hand wheel. Make sure the needles are out when you're doing that. And then once that's pulled back, you can start sewing. And you can see that the guide has actually started to fold the edges of the bind under. So that when you've sewn that, gives you a finished edge on the upper side as well as underneath. So it's folded both edges for a finished bind edge, and it's got the 2 rows of stitching on the top and the looper thread underneath. So when you're using binding, and I will on another time I will teach you how to cut the binding. It's basically a 3 centimetre width of fabric, stretch fabric, and we're going to use that to sew our armhole edge. You do need a little bit of wastage at the start, just to make sure that the machine is working correctly before you put your work in there. And then we're putting our armhole edge right side facing up, so in this case we're actually starting with the back of the t-shirt, and we want to get the edge of the fabric right in to this spot here. I'll just move that out of the way so you can see. So we want the edge of the fabric to sit right in to the bind on the folded edge of the fabric. So that's what we're going to be keeping our eye on while we sew. Get your end. Sometimes it's handy to use tweezers to just sort of pop it in there. Get your edge in there, and then the feed dog will pull the fabric in. You don't need to pull or push it, so just let it feed into there, and just keep your eye on that edge. And as we go around the curve, we're just going to adjust it, and we're just going to keep the cut edge of the fabric in that sweet spot of the bind where the fold is. And just let it feed the fabric in at its own pace. Now once you get up to the shoulder seam, just make sure which way the shoulder should be pressed. We want it facing towards the back, and as we're on the back, we'll need to make sure that that stays pushed towards the back as it takes the fabric in. Now if those edges are uneven, it's a good idea to trim them back first so that you've got a nice straight edge for the bind to go onto. And that goes for any part of the neckline. If there was a bit sticking out, you would need to trim it back first so that you've got a nice straight edge to work with. Now we have a needle guard on there, so your hand shouldn't be getting in any closer than the needle guard really. And then we've got that armhole curve again, so we're just slowing down and making sure that our edge stays in. And just run off a little bit so that you can get your scissors in there and cut off. This machine does not have cut off and it doesn't have reverse. No cover stitch machine has reverse on it, so we're just running off, and there's our bound edge of our armhole, ready to now do our side seams.